I get the icon in cornflower blue?
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 42 of Can I Get That Software in Blue? I'm your host, Chad Tyndall. Along with me, from search to scale, he's on your side with vector smarts that won't subside. The virtuoso of vectors with AI bona fide, the emperor of elastic joining the ride. My co-host, Steve Mazak. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chad. It's good to be here again. Great intro as always.
You kept saying for the last few episodes I made it weird by going to Weaviate because you were back at Elastic, but now I'm back at Elastic. So is it not weird anymore?
You're back at Elastic.
Is it not weird anymore?
It's not weird anymore. It's great. I'm actually very humbled that you decided to come work at Elastic with me. I know you could work pretty much anywhere you wanted, so it's exciting.
It's nice to be back. I'll say it feels like I've never boomeranged to a company before. 25 years of my career. It's my first time going back to a former employer. I didn't know what to expect, but honestly, so many people are still there from the old days. Dave Erickson, Baha, Nick, all those guys. So obviously the company's much bigger now, but it feels very comfortable. Well, speaking of feeling very comfortable, we have a special guest today. She's been on the podcast before. It's actually our first repeat guest. We've never had a repeat guest before, or a sequel. So I guess we're going down the Marvel path here with sequels. So guess who's back? We've got a treat. Our first repeat guest here in the hot seat, Moscow born and a product pro. Now she owns marketing with a killer flow. She's twice as sharp and twice as fun. Tanya Bragin, welcome back to the show.
Chad, amazing. I wasn't sure if you could top your previous intro, but you have. You definitely still got it. I was expecting a little bit of twerking going on, a little bit of
twerking.
Next time.
What kind of show did you think you were coming on to?
I don't know. Don't know.
That's when we go to Vegas and we're dancing in the club. Okay, this is different. That's for AWS Summit. That's not on the show here.
Come to the ClickHouse party, and then we'll see. We'll see you've got on the dance floor.
Yeah, the ClickHouse parties are getting a little famous, honestly.
That's right.
Did you have the chain smokers or something last year?
We had the chain smokers. Yeah. Part of our bold brand building strategy. We'll definitely touch on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, you raised $350 million Series C recently. We're going to talk about that. So I assume you. Well, I don't know who you're going to hire next. So Bruce Springsteen or something. You got so much money.
Taylor Swift.
Oh, that would be. You could bring Tay Tay. Yeah. Can you get Travis Kelce there? Travis Kelce too.
We'll see. Or AI. We'll just bring AI on. It's incredible what AI can do, including making up songs. But no, we still go real.
We put requests in because I would like to see Post Malone do a little rap about ClickHouse.
Oh,
yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
He's moving into other genres lately.
So you were on episode 29 almost 2 years ago, back in September of 2023. Like we said, you're our first repeat guest. We wanted to have you back on because your first episode was so good, so informative, so engaging. Also, you should know that your episode is the most watched episode of this podcast in history.
Well, Thank you, I guess, to the fans of this podcast, and I appreciate the viewership. I hope that the second one holds up as well. I plan to share. I don't plan to hold back. So yeah, ask away.
Gorov is in second place, so you can take that to him and let him know you beat him out by over 100 views.
Former elasticians, there's a trend there going. And Tanya, last time we talked, I think you had a lot of great insights into how you think and how you approach things. And I think that resonates with a lot of folks. So
I think if anybody wants to hear about Tanya's career path, how she started as a sales engineer, made her way into product management, Elastic, now ClickHouse, and definitely check out that episode. We're not going to be covering the same material today. We're going to go over new stuff. And that clip of you discussing how you approached building the pricing model for ClickHouse Cloud, and kind of weighing the pros and cons of like a perfectly fair pricing model, like where every billing dimension is metered and accounted for, but that leads to unpredictable pricing. And you found that customers actually wanted more predictable pricing, even if it isn't truly fair utility pricing. I think it's one of the best discussions on cloud pricing I've ever seen. And I've sent that clip to a lot of people, and I don't know. I just like that clip a lot. I mean, I like the whole episode, but that was like a really amazing moment.
Yeah. Well, pricing remains a passion. Maybe we can even touch on that. There's definitely topics once we get into industry trends that I'm thinking a lot about right now as far as pricing goes.
Yeah, we want to talk about that. Well, let's hit the Series C that you guys just raised, $350 million. I guess you experiencing 3 to 5x growth. I couldn't find a number, so maybe I don't know if you're free to drop it, but I'm guessing your ARR is north of 100 million now or something like that, based on this kind of valuation.
Yeah, so close to that. There's definitely been leaks. I'm not going to comment directly, but yes, given our trajectory, this is roughly the territory we're in, and just very excited and very thankful to the ClickHouse fans as well as technologists in general embracing real-time analytics as a platform, and yeah, seeing a lot of excitement there, both in traditional use cases and some of the newer use cases that are emerging, especially around agentic workloads. A lot of that drives innovation, experimentation, and just requires a new data platform. So thankful to be in the right place at the right time, but also hopefully building something that is standing apart from the rest of the very busy data ecosystem, which I think you will agree. There's a lot going on in this space right now.
There's a lot going on. When you joined the episode before, you were VP of product. Now you're VP of product and VP of marketing. That's relatively uncommon. I mean,
it's uncommon, yeah. I mean, we can give a little bit of background of how this came about. So I guess maybe stepping back a little bit in my career. So as you mentioned, I came through the ranks of engineering. Actually, I was an engineer by training, computer science, went into consulting and solution architecture, so technical, but customer-facing work, and eventually was recommended to look at product management, and that became my passion. And in particular, I started working with startups. I worked for ExtraHop, which is a data analytics startup in networking, but really Elastic, where we all worked together, was my big, if not breakthrough, but just like an amazing ride. And that's where I learned to love open source as well, is something that I just didn't have a ton of experience before Elastic, and Elastic is and continues to be a great company driving innovation, and open source is really at the core of that innovation. And so when I was looking at careers following that, ClickHouse stood out to me because it was a very popular open source project in the analytics space. And for me, this is a big passion of mine at this point going forward. As part of my product career, one of the reasons I think I have been successful in the infrastructure space is because of this engineering background and working with very technical teams on kind of practical product management, not necessarily by the book, really kind of intuition driven and very empathetic both to the customer perspective and to engineering perspective. When you're working on complex database products, you can't just sort of put together a waterfall project plan and be like, okay, engineers, go build it. It doesn't work like that. It's hard work. You have to innovate. And so as a product leader, you have to be both very technical and at the same time strategic, right? So that's really a lot of those things I really learned at Elastic. And I'm very thankful for all of the leadership that we had in place at the time that I was there. The partnership, Steve, with you and your team, solution architects. At Elastic is also where I learned really like the first step in marketing. So we had a product marketing team, Steve, as you recall, that reported into product management. Asavri, Dale, many folks that really seeded that team. And that was a very, again, technical marketing function, right? So this was engineers who fundamentally just like to build demos, write blogs, and really talk about technology, but hands-on engineers. And following that, when we formed the observability business unit, while marketing didn't report to me, I really got a sense of what it was like to work with a powerful marketing team through kind of a matrix set of professionals that were dedicated to evangelizing the observability use case for Elastic. So when I came to ClickHouse, Aaron and I had a conversation about what we wanted to do with the company and how we wanted to grow. We really didn't have a marketing function when I joined. I joined when we were about 40 people, mostly engineers, some fledgling support. And our first goal was to build cloud as a company. So I joined as a product leader to lead this cloud offering. And as I was building, I was like, look, at a minimum, we need product marketing. We need to be able to message to the market what this cloud offering is and isn't. It has to be technically credible. So like at Elastic, we formed a product marketing team, a technical product marketing team. Dale actually was again, talk about kind of repeat careers. He was my first hire. He actually was in the company already as part of support and professional service. And I said, Dale, we really need you here. We need you to help me build a marketing function and really base it in this technical product marketing capacity. Because again, our audience is very technical. Nobody really wants to hear buzzwords. They want to understand exactly why we're differentiated at a deeply technical level. So that was the beginnings of our marketing function. And as things progressed, again, Aaron and I had a discussion, Aaron, our CEO, and I had a discussion about where we wanted to take things next. We had a strong product marketing function reporting to me. We had some field and community folks that were kind of loosely in marketing, not reporting to me. We said, why really segregate? Like the strategy is already being formed on the product side. We have this strong product marketing function, the field function, the community function, and the demand function, which we didn't have yet, really are almost like an execution arm of that strategy. Why keep them artificially separate? Like, let's try to bring it together. Let's see what power results from that. So I've been in that role now for a year with all of marketing reporting to me. I have learned a ton about what it really means, because those parts, field marketing, demand generation, honestly, were a little bit of a mystery to me. Because of how effective Elastic's marketing function was. Like, we had a handoff, and so they kind of like just did magic. Stuff just happened behind the scenes. Now I've looked behind the curtain. I know what happens there, so I'm happy to demystify what these functions actually do. It's been incredible. But what I can tell you so far, what I've learned is that it really is very powerful for a technical product to combine the two functions. I'll give you some examples.
So when you mentioned like demand gen, I'm curious, when you had conversations with Aaron about how you were going to do this, like, I imagine it was a combination of wanting to have the inbound, which is the, the Glengarry leads, so to speak. And then there's a lot of outbound that you would have to do. And I don't understand totally what it would be like to have to allocate budgets to those things. Like, how do you decide where to spend most of your time and energy?
Again, I think every business is a little bit different, and every company is born at a different time and kind of has unique challenges. This is another thing. Like, there's like certain playbooks you'll hear, like marketing leaders talk about playbooks and how they've done it in the past. While that experience is valuable, I think what's also important is every company exists in a unique moment in time, and its growth trajectory needs to be treated with kind of a little bit of a grain of salt, looking at the history. So while you should learn from history, you should always adjust and dare to do things differently in kind of a new reality. So one difference, for example, between ClickHouse and Elastic is that we started off as a cloud first, cloud actually only company. We did not have any commercial strategy around monetizing like open source directly. We had a few support contracts, honestly, for relationship purposes before we built our cloud, but our primary go-to-market is cloud, partnering with AWS on a native offering there, GCP, then Azure. And so as a company, we actually look a lot more like Datadog versus, say, Splunk, or kind of a more traditional enterprise company. We have a huge amount of PLG motion where customers come to our cloud offering, sign up, and start kind of building from there. Yes, those are just sort of like play around starter projects often, but then we can see them grow. And so kind of how our enterprise sales motion typically works is that we look at that, we look at those signals, and then we decide where and when to engage. It's very different. We actually don't do a ton of outbound. We don't. Like, to date, all of our growth has been through that motion. Our sales team honestly can't keep up with demand. And that's a very different situation than if you absolutely like have to go and do a ton of outbound. So then the marketing function has to support that and has to figure out the right investments. And so for me, it's not top of mind actually to invest in a ton of outbound. At some point, maybe it will change once like that demand we work through, and like we need to kind of expand into new areas where we are not organically seeing PLG growth. But right now, my priority is actually how do I effectively nurture, right? Like those leads that sales shouldn't be spending time because we have limited capacity. How do we effectively, first of all, figure that out? What is a sales worthy, not even lead? I'll talk about this in a minute. I actually think it has to be at the account level. Which account has seen enough signals where sales should engage and where we should nurture them in more and more creative ways? And we'll talk about AI tooling here in a minute. Again, with a small marketing team, really through automation, to make sure that we get them to that level. That's my number one priority. It's not about cold outbound.
The fact that you don't need to do outbound, is that really just a function of you already have a huge open source adoption before you started the company?
It's a little bit of that. What was really surprising to me, Chad, is that a lot of our cloud adoption was not necessarily direct migration from open source workloads, but it is influenced by open source in a sense that those champions that started in cloud maybe have tried open source before for previous projects, or maybe have heard about the project and kind of played around with it. So yes, open source definitely plays a big role. It's what's driving a lot of interest and a lot of demand. I would say at the same time, I think it's also the cloud strategy itself. How approachable is your solution? How easy is it to get going? How frictionless is the pricing model and the model of just like putting on a credit card for like a small use case and growing? If your solution is optimized for that, you're going to see a lot more of that demand building over time. Versus if you don't have that mechanism and you expect kind of a more heavy POC based process, which may be the right thing for a different type of product, but for ours, the PLG motion works better.
Tanya, when you're nurturing these folks that are engaging with your properties and your product, like, are there some pivotal moments that you're trying to capture with these signals where it's like, okay, this represents something that's like a change in their engagement, and that's the right time to engage?
Yeah. So I want to talk about Steve, because I think this is very much on my mind. The old sort of approach to nurturing leads has been, okay, let's look at their past behavior. Maybe they downloaded a white paper of a certain type. Maybe they came to a certain type of event. Maybe they attended a certain type of training or whatever, took it in self-paced. And you put them in a category. You're like, okay, this person has touched this kind of asset. Let's put them, say, in a category of like they're interested in vector search. Or they touched this kind of asset, so maybe let's put them in a category of observability. And then you just kind of keep based on that past behavior, you keep sending them hopefully relevant content based on what you release. This is a very typical nurture flow. Up until recently, that's been honestly pretty good. That's a pretty good personalized way to kind of nurture folks, better than just blasting them with everything and they just unsubscribe.
Trying to give them content they'll actually care about and use the right time, right?
Going forward, I actually see this changing. So we're users of Common Room. Common Room at first was adopted as a solution for community engagement tracking. Like anybody who's like, in our Slack channel, anybody who's on social media, which a lot of folks right now on LinkedIn, honestly, they may not realize it, but they release a lot of signals about what they care about, like what they upvote, what they even comment on. Certainly if they post something, like there's a lot of signals coming out of engagement on LinkedIn, Reddit, certainly like if they come to any of our community channels or actually like engage with content, but even like outside of that. And I believe that going forward, it's those additional signals that we need to mine. So I'll give you an example, right? So let's just say in the past, somebody came and engaged with our vector search content, but now they switched to a new role and now they're focused on a new project and it has to do with observability. This may not be yet represented in like a training that they've attended with us, but maybe they actually liked our content on social media. Maybe they've posted somewhere else, like a new role. These signals actually should be mined, and then we should personalize content with kind of more their going forward role as opposed to their past role. So I actually think now, especially with agentic tools that are coming on the market to assist organizations like ours, they'll be able to provide even more hyper-personalized content based on forward-looking behavior as opposed to past behavior. So I definitely see a fundamental change in the way that we engage with professionals. I think everybody's just sick of being inundated with irrelevant links and irrelevant messages. Everybody's tired. And if anything, I feel like simply automating that more through like AI assisted but backward looking tools, if anything, just increases the volume of irrelevant content. I think where organizations and AI assisted tools are going to differentiate is changing all this and saying the old approaches don't work. Let's take a look at a new way to engage that's even more hyper personalized. That's where I think it's going to be, the industry is going to be going. So when I look at tools, when I look at vendors, that's what I look at. I don't want to see just some gimmick where like somebody's like, oh, look at this humanoid SDR. I'm like, do people really want a humanoid SDR, or do they want to learn in a completely fundamentally different way that is hyper personalized, like almost like based on their desires, not on your desires and your news?
Other than Common Room, what tools have you seen that you really like that you're using?
So we're still engaging. I actually can't talk about all of them because a lot of these startups are in stealth mode. There's a lot of innovation happening in startups that are innovating both for marketing and sales leaders. So while we're not directly looking at like cold outbound, we are starting to do more strategic account development. I guess that's where we will do more kind of what you'd consider cold outbound, very specialized. I would call this more in a category of ABM. Like I think AI assisted sales research tools are going to be really big. So there's definitely startups doing that. That may not be directly in my stack, but I consider that very important. That's where marketing hands off to sales, right? Like once you know an account is kind of heating up, you still need to do that account development. So how do you do that as a sales leader in a hyper-personalized way? There's definitely startups in that area. Unfortunately, I can't name them. Like some of them are in stealth. And same with marketing. Like there are organizations that are building something new, something hot. But I would say the most innovative tools are not out on the market yet. And you have to kind of engage with these early startups and be a design partner. Frankly, that's what I want to do. Like I want to be super smart about how we build our marketing function. I want to work with some of these early startups and help them build the right solution for the future.
What signals do you look at when you're trying to say this account is something that we need to actually go send people to and focus on?
So far, it's fairly basic. Again, I try to keep things simple. Like if I can't explain our marketing qualified accounts in like, I don't know, like a 3-bullet, summary that like a CEO understands, I probably have overcomplicated it. So it's really 3 main categories. One is engagement with training. Let's just be honest. When you're learning about something and you're actually like attending training or attending, some sort of other like learning materials self-paced, that's a huge signal. Like when somebody invests time this day and age, not just like touches and downloads or whatever, but invests time, that is a huge signal. So Generally speaking, training is a very strategic company function to us. Most of our training today is actually free. We may be doing more kind of paid training in the future that's like longer form, but we see that as extremely strategic, and that's a huge signal. The second one is it does have to do with event engagement, but it goes beyond just simply like getting scanned at the booth. Like if somebody actually like follows up with a particular email afterwards, or, like even I would say commenting, like when we send out post-event content and have like social media posts, if somebody actually bothers to comment on a post, I see that as a high intent signal, because again, they're taking the time to do something. And then the third one is basically if you have enough activity on the actual usage side. So as I mentioned, like we're quite PLG driven. So once you have a certain amount of activity where people are starting trials, maybe downloading open source, but again, that's a kind of a weaker signal in some cases. So we'll bubble it up. And kind of how I see it is a combination of all three of that is very, very high signal. But even sort of like if you just look at them in isolation, like you see 1 or 2 out of 3, I would start bubbling it up. So there's definitely a scoring mechanism, but these are the main 3 buckets.
Do you see a similar customer breakdown, kind of what we saw at MongoDB and at Elastic, where it's like the banks on the East Coast spend a lot of money, the tech companies on the West Coast spend a lot of money, and maybe the government in DC spends a lot of money? Like that kind of segmentation, what do you see?
Definitely, I would say yes. So tech sector is a very important sector for us. And it also is the case that I would say it's growing, right? So like just look at AI companies. So many AI companies are being born today. They all have huge data needs. So ClickHouse is very strong because it's a real-time analytical database you can like embed in your SaaS offering. The tech sector is huge for us. But not only, in many industries that are maybe would not be qualified as tech, let's be honest, like financial companies today are tech companies. They all have huge tech stacks. They all have tech solutions that they use to provide services to their customers. Some of them are even directly at this point in the tech space. Capital One has a software division, right, where they provide technology offerings for the broader market. So many industries today it's almost like hard to say what's tech and what's not tech. Like many traditional industries are turning very tech oriented. I would say any organization that is tech first is kind of a good target for us. You mentioned government. I mean, of course, the same, right? Government deals with huge amounts of data, and more they have to really think responsibly about investments, think about cost. And so any organization that has a technology stack, has real-time needs, and has a particular use case where they need to think not only about ability to deliver something, but also in a cost-effective manner, that's when they look at ClickHouse. But yeah, Chad, I think you broke it down like well. I would definitely say that like technology, financial services, government, those are big sectors for us.
Tanya, in your experience with product and now marketing, like I've wondered if the team dynamics are different between a product team and a marketing team and how you manage that.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on it. The biggest surprise to me in marketing was, and I'll just have a confession first. So before I officially took the responsibility of leading like the part of the marketing team that didn't report to me, and I didn't know very well like their workload and what they do day to day, like it was sort of behind the curtain. So this includes community, this includes field marketing, and this includes demand gen. I was just sort of assuming that because like certain ideas that I had about marketing, because they seemed like simple ideas, and like my attitude was like, well, why not just execute on them? Like they're logically, it seems very simple. Just go organize an event.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned is that like I just really underestimated the amount of time and ingenuity it takes to organize a good event, for example. And so it's been a very humbling experience for me. Once I came into the marketing team, I just realized how underappreciated, frankly, the marketing professionals were, honestly, by technologists like me. And I felt genuinely bad because I think I kind of have assumed that there was just this infinite capacity to execute on whatever idea I had. And once I got it, I realized, no, like marketing, building a brand, it's a product, it's a process, right? There is a roadmap. There is the biggest limiting factor I have is actually not budget. Like, frankly, like you just said, like we're super well capitalized. It's human resources. It's basically ability not only to come up with good ideas, but execute on them effectively. And so that's really what I'm finding out. I just want to say like field marketing is one of the most underappreciated functions out there in particular. You work closely with them in your roles, of course. These folks work very hard. They're on the road a ton. They're doing big and small events. They're organizing all kinds of initiatives. So yeah, it's been a humbling experience, I would say, for me, kind of how I think about these 3 functions. demand gen is almost like the science of marketing. Like if you don't have an effective demand gen function, you won't be able to, you can do a lot of activities, but you won't be able to justify, Steve, to your earlier point, where this investment, both human and financial capital, makes sense versus not. You won't be able to take activities and actually map them to outcomes. So you won't be able to ultimately, like whatever your measuring stick is for effectiveness of the marketing team, whether it's building pipeline, which is very common. For us, it's, by the way, not the only measure. Whether it's MQAs, like the things that I really agonize over, you won't be able to measure it. So you need a very effective demand gen function, not only from an execution, but from a reporting perspective. That was my number one hire. When I got into marketing, I said, I don't know enough about demand gen. I need a very effective demand gen professional who's been there, done that, who knows the marketing tech stack, and who understands like how to think about critical metrics and actually operationalize them. So demand gen is like the science of marketing. Then you've got like the troops, like this is your field. Your field marketers love them because like without these troops, nothing happens in marketing. Like absolutely, like just appreciate these professionals. Oftentimes, again, they're almost like invisible to the rest of the organization. They may be known in a particular region, but like then globally, it's a tough career. Many field marketers do eventually sort of grow into other roles, but until then, like it's a very, I think, underappreciated function that I've learned a lot about and come to just like really, really cherish. And then community, I think, is kind of in a similar place as field marketing. It's often misunderstood. For us, community is very much in person, but I would say like if events that are have less of like an immediate like return on investment. Basically, these are like invest forward with tech partners, invest forward with certain projects.
What do you mean by invest forward with a project?
So you may not be an immediate ROI. Like I'll give you an example. So like the house party that we're organized, like I consider that more of a community event. It's less critical whether or not pipeline came out of that event versus like we made a lot of noise. Like we had a lot of mind share that resulted from this. Of course, pipeline also like came out of that event. It did. But it's sort of like, it was like less of a measure. Like the measure of success for me was like how many registrations, like how oversubscribed were we? We had like 1,000 people that could get in. How oversubscribed were we in terms of like noise and demand? Did people love it? Like, did we have great like social noise and like did people enjoy the event? So it's a little bit different. Like I view community as a little bit of brand building and a little bit of sort of investing forward with tech partners. Like we may have a tech partner. We don't know yet if we're going to necessarily like mesh. Like, yes, there's some product integration, but like, let's see what happens if we try to combine our communities. That's kind of how I think about it. It's a little bit more experimental versus field is investing in particular campaigns that we already know are going to scale. Like we already know observability, let's just say, is a new use case and we're just going to beat that drum forever, right? So community is a little bit more experimental. Field is a little bit more like repeat and just like really drive specific outcomes. You need both. You absolutely need both.
The house party was your big user conference that you had recently?
No, the house party was the reInvent party.
Oh, the chain smokers party. Okay.
Yeah, the chain smokers party. And then open house was our user conference. That was the most recent event. Yeah.
All right. So I basically want to ask the same question probably multiple times from different angles. So I'm just fascinated by this idea of a technical product person going into marketing. It's so abnormal. And I want to know, given that we've all been to these events many, many times over the last, however long we've been in this career, some of them are good, some of them are bad. But the people who run these field marketing events, they're not the consumers of this event, right? They're not the engineers. They're not the product people. So they try to throw an event that is, going to be liked by those people, but they are not those people. Yeah. You are those people. So what are you doing differently when you run these events now, knowing what you know as a consumer of these events?
Absolutely. Let's talk about the user conference then, because that was our first party event that was bigger than a meetup. We organize a lot of meetups, and those have, more of like a regional flair and more of like, let's just kind of all get together, have some pizza, have some beers, and like hear actually mostly from our customers. Our meetups are primarily like our customers talking. There's not a lot of presentations from us. It's customer showcase. The open house, the idea was that we organized our first event for practitioners globally. It ended up being, frankly, more of a North America event, just at our stage today. Like we didn't have a ton of people flying from Europe and Asia Pacific. At some point, I'm sure it's going to change. So it became kind of more like a North America event. And we realized we're actually going to take the content and take it on road shows.
That makes sense.
Asia Pacific. Yeah.
And
maybe that's common. Like maybe that we should have expected that. But yeah, it was our first like kind of bigger North America event. And so a few things. Previously, of course, as a head of like a product line at Elastic, when I was responsible for logging and eventually for observability, I was part of these events. I would present at them, but I never had to organize one. Again, the amount of time it takes to organize an event, like it was just humbling to me. So let me tell you like what happens behind the scenes during that time. And I'll also tell you why like being both a head of product and the head of marketing really helped me in this event. And again, just a kind of like a spoiler, the event went very well. I was very nervous about it. It was a first. We actually happened to announce our funding round the same day. So it was a lot of things had to come together, like a lot of coordination. It was very stressful. But in the end, like I'm quite a self-critical person. I'll say that it went extremely well. Like it met my very high bar for like what I would consider a success. The biggest surprise to me is how logistically difficult it is just to like build out an event. So like you get a venue is empty. You have to get a bunch of vendors. Like we worked with 6 different vendors to literally build everything out. It was at the Pearl, which is a beautiful venue, but it literally it's like an empty warehouse. Somebody has to like almost like look at this warehouse and be like, okay, I envision this beautiful space, and like think about like where should the stage be, what size should it be, where should the backdrop be, what should the lighting be, like on the mezzanine, should we have like some sort of place for people to hang out? Well, you have to like literally rent furniture and bring it in. All these details, like organizing the showcase. We had a place for ourselves and for others to showcase demos as a separate area. Somebody has to design it. So many logistics, so much vendor management, all these contracts. Again, just this thankless work that happens in the background that honestly, I never thought about it. I was like, just organize an event. Months and months of like just this kind of work and lots of logistics, especially like last few weeks leading up to the event. These vendors are sometimes frankly unreliable. You don't know if they're going to show up. You don't know if they're going to bring the right stuff. So much just like angst and so many things that could potentially go wrong. And like last minute, you have to just kind of scramble and still make it all work. So that's the logistical part of it. But
and you got to have good Wi-Fi.
That's right. Wi-Fi, it's always a problem.
Oh
right?
my
like,
God. Yeah, it's always a problem.
And that's like a separate vendor. There's a vendor for everything, a vendor for lighting, a vendor for stage, a vendor for furniture, a vendor for catering. Like, again, literally in addition to the venue itself, 5 or 6 different vendors.
As you start to list it out, it becomes a little overwhelming. Like I hadn't thought about renting the furniture and getting the lighting correct.
And you know what? Like, and you'll know this individual. The person who dealt with all this is Tyler Hanna. You might remember him.
Oh yeah.
He is, extremely experienced, in community and product marketing. But for us, he took on everything, and he just sort of like with a broader team, he kind of led this whole event. And I'll be like, I'll just be honest. I was very nervous. I'm like, Tyler, is it going to come together? Because it looks a little iffy. He's like, Tanya, just trust me. Like, I'll come ahead of the event. I'm going to physically come to San Francisco, and I'll make sure like everything happens. And that's what we had to do. He had to physically come from he's based in Amsterdam to San Francisco, and just spend like a week and a half herding cats. Like that's what his job was. So yeah, that's the thankless work behind the scenes that nobody really talks about. I call it like the iceberg of events. We see like nice, venue, good looking venue, good ambience, like nice food, great talks. And then there's this iceberg of execution underneath. That's just like endless. 6 months. And that's actually not even that long of a time to plan. Like some of these events literally take a year to plan.
What's an example of something that you were like, I hate when conferences do this. We're not doing this.
Let's actually talk about the agenda, because we rented this venue because a few of us attended an event at the Pearl. But one thing I actually didn't realize until I rented it was like, it's actually a single track venue. There's no way to have breakouts there. Yes, there's a separate space, but it's not a good space to actually have a session. So we repurposed it for like demos, but literally you just have one place for talks. And it's a single day event. And kind of very quickly I realized that's not a lot of time, actually. One day is not a lot of time. And so we had to organize our agenda in a fairly like unique way that I didn't anticipate at first. I was like, we're going to have like half an hour, 45-minute talks on all kinds of topics. And we'll have, all these customer talks. And then I realized there's no time. And so we had a keynote, of course, 90-minute keynote, which had to capture all the major announcements and including the funding. And then we had only time really for 4 one-hour sessions, each dedicated to one of our key use cases. And the session was basically, the 1-hour session was broken up into 4 lightning talks. It was 1 or 2 lightning talks from us about like some key feature, the key announcement in that use case. The rest were customers. That's all I had time for. So like learning from that, if I want to do more, I need to have either multi-track events or 2 days. And the feedback that you asked, Chad, like what I don't want to repeat. So the feedback I've gotten from users is actually they love the single track format. The problem with breakouts is that you always feel like, first of all, like you're going to miss out on something. And second, it kind of becomes sort of like, well, if it's not important enough to be like on main stage as a single track, maybe it's not that important. It creates this sort of like attitude that maybe, like if I'm going to miss something, I may as well miss everything. Maybe I'll just leave the event. Maybe I'll just, watch the recordings. Maybe I'll just go and talk to somebody. With a single track event, everybody was button seats. Like, honestly, that's what it was. Like, nobody really left. Like, we had 350, 400 people at the event from the beginning. Maybe a few left, but like it was full the whole time. It creates this sort of like communal experience, like everyone's experiencing everything at the same time. Lightning talks actually ended up being, we did it because we just had no choice, but it ended up being a great format. Nobody got bored. The truth is, if you have a 45-minute talk, like yourself, you come on stage, you kind of like just, ad lib for 3 minutes, and then you finally get into your topic. If you only have 10 minutes to get a point across, you don't have time for that. You have to get in, you have to be concise, you have to get out. Like we had very short amount of time to make announcements, and every product leader on my team who had that 10 minutes, they made it count. And so the feedback I got was lightning talks, great, keeps it engaging. Single track, great, keeps it focused and keeps it very the feeling is that this content is so important and scarce that you should be really sitting there to learn. Yeah, interestingly, learnings were like we ended up doing it right, but almost by mistake. It was almost like, oh my God, like why did I sign a contract with this venue that only allows a single track? Okay, now I got to make it work. But like the learning from that was that maybe that's the right way to go, right? So I guess my kind of maybe feedback there for like event planners out there, don't assume that just because everybody does breakouts that you should be doing breakouts. Like really think about sort of your community, experiment with different formats of engagement, get that feedback. And the other part I want to talk about a little bit is the content itself. It's not an accident. The content has to be thought through very strategically. So this is where I had to put my the head of product hat and really think about, okay, like I have only a day to get all of our major announcements out. What are those announcements? We started planning that 6 months in advance. Like when we started promoting the event is when I went to the engineering team and I said, we have this conference in May. What are we going to be announcing? Like what are going to be the biggest things? And of course, we already had our top priorities. I can talk a little bit about how actually we approached the roadmap this year. We've done something different here. And so I basically said, each one of your top 5, figure out which like 2 or 3 of them need to make it to the conference announcement. And I had some pretty strong opinions on that. I was like, joins have to be in an announcement. Like even if like we're never going to be done with like improving joins, but we absolutely have to announce how much progress we made in joins. So I was like, joins team, like what are you going to have by May to announce? It's not negotiable that it's on stage. And, the engineering leader for joins, you're going on stage. What are you going to be announcing? And so for me, it was really great to have both hats. I was the head of marketing and I was the head of product, right? I was organizing this event and I knew how much effort it took to put it on. I was going to make it count. I was going to make sure the best, most impactful product announcements would go out. Whereas in the past, I've seen sometimes you almost like have this two-headed beast. The head of marketing is like, oh, I want to make all these announcements. The head of product is like, but it's not ready. And like, it's not healthy, actually. Like you should absolutely be unified. There needs to be a balance. Some things can be announced in preview. It's okay. It's okay to announce something that you're still going to work on throughout the year. As long as you are committed to that direction, you should absolutely make the announcement. Anyway, I've talked for a while here, learned a lot, but it was definitely like, this was the moment, like when we finished the conference, I felt like it was a success. I was like, this is why it really makes sense to be both a head of marketing and head of product, because you end up with an outcome like this user conference that's truly unified strategically. Yeah, it was a great feeling.
Tanya, how do you measure the impact of those things without data? Like, is there a feel to it?
Events, definitely there is a feel to it. Like, did people come out? So like there was a founder of a startup that I respect that, was there. I'm not going to name him just because like sometimes it's a little bit sensitive, like who uses us versus not, but it's a user of ClickHouse, actually kind of a tough customer, definitely has challenged us on a few dimensions. And, he came out of this event, extremely energized and basically said, and again, very, very smart, like technical person. He was like, look, I learned a lot. I felt like, like every single talk had something that I could benefit from. And honestly, the biggest compliment for me, it was just a bunch of us, like technology kind of like, he called it geeks, like we're just a bunch of geeks, like talking about real stuff. Right. And, for me, like, I think there's a certain like energy that you want to reach with an event. For us, this was a practitioner focused event. It was specifically not for executives. We said, look, this is not, if you're like an executive, we're not going to have a ton of interesting stuff here. This is really for technologists. It's for technologists to discover the next trends in analytics, how we view, where we're going in AI, and we want to reach that. And so like having somebody who I consider to be like the exact persona that we targeted for this event coming out, actually saying this unsolicited. This came to me almost like inbound. That was like a success in terms of like the feel that we wanted to have.
That makes sense. All right, one last question about your marketing role, and then maybe we transition over to the AI ML stuff, because I know we want to talk about that. Like taking on this role, did you think about finding people in your network in the community that you could leverage as advisors? And do you have advisors for that?
I absolutely did. So actually, again, when I first took on this role, I won't lie, I was a little terrified. I'm like, am I going to be able to come up to speed quickly enough? We're an extremely fast growing startup, right? And if I don't figure it out and I don't make a difference, and like there's going to be like some period of time where it'll be understood that I'm learning. But at some point, I have to figure it out, both in terms of motivating and building a team, investing in initiatives that truly matter, and delivering business outcomes. Ultimately, in the end, for a growing sales team, it's the right amount of leads and activity for them to make sure that we have a commercial success. So the first thing I did, honestly, I reached out to Yosh. Like, Yosh, he's been on this podcast before. Yep. That was the first person that came to mind. I'm like, he led Elastic through exactly the period of growth that I'm looking to lead.
And Sneak too, yeah.
And Sneak, of course, yeah. And I just reached out and I'm like, Yosh, let's talk. We spent 2 hours. He's now, as you know, building a startup. He was very generous with his time. I came over to his office and the first thing he asked me is like, tell me about your team. What do you currently have on your team as far as skill sets? How many? And we talked and he's like, look, you're actually extremely understaffed. Let me talk to you like about why, this needs to be different. Honestly, I'll took that with a bit of a grain of salt. Like to the point I made earlier, I don't know that I necessarily want to assume things like staffing levels based on, what somebody else has experienced like in a different company at a different time. Like we're going to try to do certain things differently. We're going to leverage AI. Having said that, there were certain things we talked about demand gen. He's like, you absolutely need a demand gen leader. He explained to me what it was. I honestly didn't really have a very clear idea. And like that alone, like that advice alone, set me on the right path. I came back to Aaron. I'm like, Aaron, I think we're actually okay in these areas. Sure, we may need to staff up in a few places, but like we're basically missing a piece. We're missing the engine, the science of marketing, and we need to go find that person and make sure that it's the right person for us. So absolutely. I also reached out to our investors and and of course they knew I was stepping into this role. And I said, introduce me to every head of marketing you have in your kind of portfolio companies that you think could give me valuable advice. They were, again, very generous with these introductions. I got introduced to all kinds of folks, including at that time, head of marketing for OpenAI. She actually moved on now. She's at Thrive, which is a VC firm. But she was the one, I talked to her a lot about metrics. I was like, how do you measure success? And this is where I was really got excited about this concept of an MQA, marketing qualified account, as opposed to marketing qualified lead. And we talked a lot about how do you actually measure how you're making an impact in a product-led growth motion, right? Enterprise motion is typically pipeline. That was Yosh's advice. He's like, just go for pipeline. But for us, pipeline is not a good measure because we only have pipeline for committed spend accounts, but our sales reps are actually get evaluated both on PLG and committed spend. So I don't want to overweight only committed spend. It doesn't make sense. So I need something that almost precedes both PLG outcome, which is just monthly spend, as well as pipeline for committed spend. And MQA, I think, is the right sort of goal for us to rally around, both in marketing and with the field handoff.
You mentioned at the top when we started wanting to talk about how you're approaching brand building for ClickHouse, the Chainsmokers concert and all of that. So, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, brand building is absolutely the area that I would say every head of marketing spends an outsized time thinking about, especially for a growing company, because that's the hardest part, I think, to just sort of execute your way out of. I think in the end, every brand, it requires some amount of ingenuity to think through what is going to result in building a strong brand. Is it going to be I know for instance, Jeff, when we came to Sneak, he really identified this cute mascot and how do we make it come alive. So sometimes it's true design branding work. You come up with a memorable visual brand. You come up with maybe, again, a memorable mascot or some other sort of relatable characteristic of your brand and you put it everywhere. For us, I think it's a lot of it is doing something that surprises people. Like we think of ourselves as like a bold technology. So how do we do something that surprises people? So when we think about events, we usually say, okay, like let's actually keep like the sponsoring to some minimum. We just want to be present on the show floor, have not the biggest booth, it's fine, but like, we're just going to be there. But then do something else that's auxiliary to like engage our audience and engage the broader community. So this is how the Chain Smokers party idea came around. We were thinking about like, what would a bold company do, right? Like at an event like reInvent. We're like, well, how about a party? I know there are other parties there, but we wanted to kind of throw a more, I would say, intimate party. Like a lot of these parties are very big, right? And you have like the stadium and it's filled. You don't really see the artist anymore. We wanted to throw like a more personalized party for the few that, are most prominent in our community and maybe like ClickHouse curious. We intentionally wanted to capacity limit it. This is another thing. Like, if you have something that is, accessible to everyone, it doesn't necessarily have that sort of like, well, like this is valuable.
Well, I remember when I was at reInvent that year, I got texts from 3 different people saying, you need to come to the ClickHouse party. They got the Chain Smokers, but they said the ClickHouse party. They didn't say come see the Chain Smokers.
Yeah.
They said come to the ClickHouse parties.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess like Chad, on brand in general, like I don't think I have it all figured out. Like I actually think in terms of like next year for me, thinking even more strategically about like evolving our brand is going to be a big deal. Like I feel like in the first year I had to focus on fundamentals. Do I have the right team? Do I have the right science? Do I have the right metrics, right? Brand, in many ways, this has been a team effort. And actually, I want to credit a few folks that you'll know in helping kind of me, almost like an extended marketing team to helping me think through this. Jake Vernon, probably know, right? He was an SA in Elastic really well. Then. He has been incredible at like, so branding, actually. He named the house party. He's like, well, if we ever throw a party, it should be called the house party. And should have this like feel, like, this, like, and he was so passionate about this idea.
That's on brand for Jake.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and then he continued in that stead. So he's been an incredible partner. Tristan has been incredible. I don't know if you've seen these, like the video actually for the house party. This like kind of like composed like like that was Tristan. So we have these amazing SAs who have great ideas for branding. So my thinking is like brand really should reflect the brain trust of your whole company. There's not like one person in like the ivory tower, head of marketing or head of design, like, thinking of like all the brand ideas. That's not how it works. You have to embrace, the talent in your company.
How do you democratize these ideas? How do you get the bottoms up ideas generated? And
I think, well, you have to earn that by doing, like, because the thing is, if people feel like they operate in an environment where ideas just constantly get shut down and you can't propose something without somebody honestly crapping on your idea, people are not going to propose their ideas. They're not going to share their creativity with you, and so you have to create an environment where it's okay to even be wrong. It's okay to propose bold ideas and, not everything has to work out, but you just have to be welcoming to them. One of the things I did operationally is like when I took over the marketing Slack, honestly, was a little bit of like, kind of a sad space. A lot of people would come there with ideas and, the marketing team, because they felt so strapped for like time and it was such a small team, they would just keep saying, no, not now. And I made a change. I said, look, first of all, let's make sure that we in the marketing channel start talking about what we are doing, because people just don't see what we're doing. Like, let's make sure anything we are doing, we're doing it in the open. We're doing it in a marketing channel. So let everybody help us celebrate what we are doing. When an idea comes up, let's not immediately say no. Let's embrace it. Let's brainstorm it. It doesn't mean we have to do it right away, but don't like have this automatic no, right? Because maybe we can change priorities. Maybe that person can actually even help us. Like oftentimes when somebody brings an idea, they're happy to be part of the solution. They're happy to like personally take it on. So I had to change that culture a little bit, honestly. And once it became very clear that we are welcoming to ideas and in fact, they have a huge impact and we embrace them and we jointly take it forward, I think it kind of turned around on its own.
Do you ever think about using any tools that allow the company to vote on ideas that are submitted by people inside the company?
So far, we haven't. We have such a huge Slack culture. Honestly, email almost doesn't get used at the company. It like drives the legal department insane. They're like, please send us an email. And everybody's like, what's an email? Like nobody uses it.
I love this trend.
Yeah, it is.
So we're just in Slack all the time, right? And so I feel like Slack is almost like a place where we vote on ideas automatically. Everybody, like the marketing channel pretty much has everybody in the company. Like that's one thing I've sort of realized. So people automatically, like engineers will jump in. And then if there's an idea, oftentimes like people actually embrace it almost naturally and you see what wins and it kind of bubbles up on its own. So we've just kind of kept that for now. For now, it scales.
Well, maybe we should transition over talking about how you guys are leveraging AI and ML inside the company and like, also as part of the product. Like, I don't know if we should start inside the company and how you're automating things, or maybe how you're building it into the product.
Let's start inside the company, actually, because we did learn a lot this year. So I think I mentioned to you earlier when we were exchanging emails, like there's vector search, which of course is a capability. But for us, like the biggest trend that we're working on right now inside of like our database, as well as the thing that we're talking to our customers around is, are you ready for agentic workloads? And what is agentic workloads? In the end, it's ability for technology that's agent enabled to leverage a data store directly, kind of in that thinking and reasoning step before going to the LLM. And so what we're seeing is a lot more customers kind of asking themselves, where would they apply? And we started doing this ourselves. So we said, okay, well, what would happen if we put an agent in front of our data warehouse? Our data warehouse is based on ClickHouse, of course, internally, but you could be using something else, BigQuery, Snowflake. What would happen if you put like a reasoning agent in front of it and just put like a natural language interface and expose it, say, to Aaron Katz? Like, what would happen?
You're saying your own internal data warehouse.
That's right. Or, other executives, and so we did that. We like literally just put like Claude, and then like we just put like an open source Libre chat like interface kind of in conjunction with it, and we exposed it to our team. And what happened was almost immediately executives stopped asking because we do have a couple of like SQL analysts, and if I can say Aaron is preparing a board report or even just needs a report for himself, he would ask our analyst to go and do like prepare a dashboard, right? And that basically stopped. Like Aaron at this point goes to this natural language interface, asks a question, and gets not only an answer to that question, but really like a whole reasoning pipeline and dashboards automatically built. Now, it didn't just happen like with putting an agent in front of it. We did have to ultimately put a bunch of business context into the metadata for models to leverage. So that was a big job that our data warehousing team had to do. But that was just a game changer in terms of executive engagement with our data warehouse. Previously, it was like, oh yeah, I think data warehouse has this data, but I'm actually not sure. And let me just like ask analysts to go figure it out and like build a dashboard. No more, right? You ask a question, the agent figures out if the relevant data is there. And if it's there, you get an answer immediately. And you even get dashboards built for you by the agent. That has been just an absolute change. I also see it on my team. I mean, of course I can write SQL queries, but I'm busy. Like I'm busy and I'm not going to necessarily do this all the time. And I felt limited, in the past in terms of like what I personally could do with a data warehouse. I would have a question, I'd be like, nah, but then I have to go write a SQL query. No more. Like if I have a question, I go ask the agent to do everything for me. So the engagement with our data warehouse has 10x easily. The bar to like engage with it also has been dramatically lowered. A lot more of our finance operations folks are not afraid now to go to interact with it. And it's just been such a liberating experience for the whole company. So I see this being one of the biggest shifts in the industry right now. I think it's going to completely change the data warehousing space. I'm not sure what this does to the BI tooling, but other than they have to embrace it. I'm not saying that you don't need like ultimately BI tools, but I think they have to be agent first in this way, where basically you have this reasoning agent helping you construct dashboards as opposed to like, you're doing it all manually yourself. I think it's going to change observability. In particular, if you think about like root cause analysis, these ad hoc questions as a SRE sometimes have to ask of machine data, that where a dashboard may not be the right experience. You're asking a question, you're trying to have somebody help you reason through maybe fairly complex technical problems, almost like go out and do research for you so you could have some threads to pull on during an investigation. I think agents are going to be really important there as well. So that's kind of what we're thinking about a lot. We think that for pretty much every database technology out there, agentic workloads are going to significantly increase the load in the database. The databases are going to have to be even more efficient and even more able to serve these like highly parallel workloads. Because like as a human, you can issue a natural language query. An agent will actually then ask like dozens of questions, pretty much in rapid succession to the database. The database has to handle that load. And frankly, fairly quickly, because usually it takes more than one human prompt to ultimately arrive at an answer. Your first question may not be specific enough or may not be quite asked the right way. So you see the agent come back and you may need to actually ask it to tune something. So actually the databases have to be fairly interactive and responsive. I do think both Elastic and ClickHouse are well positioned there because we're used to these real-time workloads. I do think kind of the more batch-oriented technologies, it still applies to do some of these workflows in a batch-oriented way. But I actually think for human-facing interactions where agents are powering those, I think interactive databases are going to be pretty much a requirement.
The metadata enrichment that you had to do in order for the agent to be able to successfully gather data, what does that look like? And is that something, how do you generalize that so that all of your customers will have to do that in their workloads as well?
That's a good question. So for us, it maybe was an easier process, is that we already had a centralized data warehouse that we invested in very early on. Like in the very, very first 6 months of Elastic, I think our operations team set up BigQuery or something like that. But as soon as the technical team started to grow, we transitioned that to ClickHouse, and we have a data warehousing team that takes care of that one sort of single data warehouse. So we don't have the challenge of having multiple data warehouses and needed to sync them. There literally is just one, and we have a team that looks after it.
This was I remember in the first episode you came on, you talked about how you had kind of your own internal version of what Bucket provides.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. This data warehouse has a few big data sources. Usage data from our cloud is absolutely there because our whole business relies on that being, this is how we calculate MRR, ARR, and also the product signals that I need to know that features are successful. They're all there. So the usage information from cloud is absolutely probably one of the biggest tables there. But not only, there's, obviously data from Salesforce. We sync a lot of data there to kind of make connections and to reason about our business. And so what the team had to do was, per data source, they had to go and we already had a data catalog basically, but they had to add more context. So I'll give you an example. We went through our pricing migration, and internally it's called PPV2, Pricing and Packaging version 2. Obviously, that's a very ClickHouse specific acronym. We don't expose it externally, but internally, so many places, there's knowledge bases that mention this acronym. They had to kind of build this in. So, because when an agent goes and marries some data in a data warehouse with some other knowledge base, it has to know this internal acronym. Here's an example, right? And so I would say most of business context was fairly straightforward. This field means this. It's in these units.
Where are you building that into? Sorry. Into the agent logic?
No, in the data warehouse itself. So we're lucky in that ClickHouse, I guess, was already kind of designed and built with this in mind. Every field in ClickHouse has a metadata subfield, basically. It's kind of built into the database itself. It's just kind of how it was in the early days. It's just that in the past, it wasn't utilized, but it's there. And so
a human description of what that field is?
Okay. Exactly. It's just part of the database. And so we were able to just start using it more. It's always been part of basically inherent schema. We're just lucky that, I guess, I don't know, somebody had the foresight, maybe it's just a matter of it being born as more of an analytical database, always played, kind of in a data warehousing space. And it's kind of a pretty natural thing for data warehouses to have.
Okay, so you had to go fill that field in and then tell the agent, look at that field for a description of
exactly
what
right.
it is.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Is that something that people would use a Calibra for when they're not using ClickHouse or they have multiple data warehouses internally? They need
probably
a big data catalog?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that technology, but exactly right. I think that in a place where you would have multiple data warehouses, first of all, or, data warehouses that maybe don't have this kind of field built in, you might need a specialized data catalog accessible in the process. Yeah.
Are you building an MCP server for ClickHouse? Are you using an MCP server with your own agent?
Yeah, we have one. Exactly. So when MCP server came out, that's actually when agentic workflows really became a reality. Until then, because you had to send all the context to the LLM itself, these applications were quite limited. With MCP server now that there is this step of let's go and gather information and kind of reason directly against the data source before we send something to the LLM. This is when it became possible. So December, I guess, was when this protocol was published and by Anthropic and all of the activity started. By January, we open sourced the MCP server for ClickHouse, but we immediately started experimenting with it internally because we didn't want to just publish something and not use it internally. So our first use case was actually because we wanted to make sure we were the first users of our own MCP server. And we're where do we put it? And we're how about in front of a data warehouse? And let's see what Aaron thinks. And it's pretty insane how quickly it just caught fire. And at first, I think we only businessified one data source, but it became obvious that everybody wants this. I think at first, the marketing oriented, web business tables were not enabled with this metadata. And I was I need this. I need this for marketing. And so the data warehousing team became very busy adding business context everywhere so that pretty much every business function could leverage it.
Is this agent something you're now providing to your users on the cloud?
We are almost there. We announced it in May in private preview. It's not yet available in public, but yes, absolutely. Because basically now that we have it internally, we see the power, we want every cloud user to have access to this technology. So 2 things we're doing. First of all, there's if you don't want to kind of attach your own interface to it, we of course have a native interface, Ask AI. It is just enabled. We partner with Anthropic, in AWS, it's Anthropic plus Bedrock, so that you can have kind of the confidence that your private data is governed properly. And then of course there's also an MCP endpoint directly. We just import it directly as a query endpoint. And you can connect your own sort of clients to it and just go at it completely alone. And so we have both capabilities. The idea is that any piece of data that you put into ClickHouse Cloud should be agent ready, from the beginning.
One of the things I've been thinking about with MCP is it could democratize access to data in a chat-like way, in a good way. Yeah. But it also means that maybe I don't need to move my data from the existing data store that it's in. Maybe I can keep it in Postgres or something else or Snowflake and not have to move it to ClickHouse, not have to move it to some other data store to get access to it, because MCP kind of becomes this shim above all of your data stores. It's almost like what the GraphQL language was trying to accomplish, right? Do you feel like it'll change the way people think about where the data lives and not care as much in the future?
We'll see. I think it depends on the kinds of question you're asking of the data, and also the cost that you're willing to bear. There's
a reason you don't do queries on your Oracle production systems and you have a, ETL process.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of how I think about it. So first of all, Postgres, if the questions you're asking Postgres can handle, then great. Yes, the data should stay in Postgres. Our general sort of relationship with Postgres, it's a great transactional database, but some questions that are analytical in nature are impossible, frankly, to ask in Postgres. It's a row-oriented database. At some point, you're scanning all the rows. It's not going to scale for certain types of analytics. So you're not going to do that in Postgres. You're going to do that in something like ClickHouse, for instance. And we have Postgres CDC as a native capability. And that's how we approach it. You have an analytical use case, but your data is only in Postgres. There's a one-click or almost a one-click, sync process you can set up and kind of get this data into ClickHouse. And now, your analytical queries are going to be super, super fast. Snowflake is different, right? Of course, that's a column-oriented database, very much an analytics first, but the question becomes latency and cost. Cost, of course, is its own beast. That's their sort of decision of how to price their product. But latency is an issue because, again, as I mentioned,
well, they're more batch oriented anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And so for them, you could make it more real time, but then it's very expensive because you have to basically throw compute at it. And things like materialized views for them are in their highest paid tier. So they're just not oriented for real time analytics. They were born in an era where it was okay just kind of to have a report or to have, kind of a much less concurrent workload running against that technology. So I think from a technology perspective and a pricing perspective, they could make some changes to adapt to this use case, but will they? I don't know. Yeah. So most of our users today that need truly highly concurrent interactive workloads, they don't favor Snowflake because of the pricing and the cost.
Yeah. I feel like we're going to enter an era again where you're going to get all kinds of new queries on your data systems that you didn't see before, and you're going to have to start optimizing again. And the optimization is going to be a little different now. It's how do I change the prompt to write this query correctly?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so many things are going to change. I mean, same with SEO. When we talk about marketing, we didn't talk about SEO, but not the majority maybe yet, but a substantial amount of our traffic to our docs, to our website is from LLMs. It's no longer direct search, right? It's people going through all kinds of interfaces where they're asking, natural language questions, and the query still comes back to us. But the result is not the content that we present. It's some summary by AI, right? And that's something we just have to embrace. We're actually talking a lot about how to optimize our content for LLMs, make it very friendly, because we still want that information to come through. Absolutely, we do.
What does that look like? How do you optimize docs pages for LLMs?
Oh yeah, forget the details. My team has been looking at it, but I think it's, presentation matters less. Structured metadata matters more. That's just ultimately what it is. Yeah. Right? Whereas in the typical documentation flow, is your navigation optimized? LLMs don't care. They don't care, right? Humans care. LLMs don't care. Is your search very good? Again, LLMs don't care. They care about the data being there, first of all. That's the biggest thing. Like if your
Yep.
data is not there, no one's going to, be able to summarize it. It has to be up to date and accurate. Because another thing, like LLM will find even the most hidden page somewhere and you think it's out of date and nobody sees it. They'll find it. They'll pull this incorrect
That's right.
information. So keeping data up to date, making sure it's there, making sure it's like organized and named in a way that is actually accurate. That's what counts.
Well, and they also get versions messed up quite a bit, right? It'll say like, do this and then do this. It's like, well, actually that's different between the different versions of technology.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
That's
it's
true.
a challenge I've
Exactly.
seen a lot lately. I also
That's
see the
right.
trust growing in LLMs and the answers people get. I believe just based on my own personal usage, there's been this like exhaustion of having to question every single thing that I see in an LLM. And at some point I'm just like, I'm just going to trust the answer. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If the LLM's wrong, it's wrong. And last year when people were referencing things they got from an LLM, like answers to a question, they would say things like, but it's from an LLM, it might be hallucinating, so take it with a grain of salt. Now they're just saying, this is what OpenAI said. This is what
That's right.
Cohere said. Or, it's just like I've seen this shift in mentality.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess show of hands, like who uses, something like ChatGPT or some other LLM backed solution for their personal search.
Oh, every day.
Every day.
Yeah. This is like my
Way too
go-to.
many.
Like
I still use Google. I still use Google a lot.
Yeah.
But if it's something that I want to do a back and forth on or have a conversation on,
Yeah.
for sure, ChatGPT and Claude. Can I ask about vectors? Let's talk about vectors for a little bit. You guys have had vectors as a data type or an index type for several years at least. I don't know when you added it. What does a vector mean in the context of an OLAP column-oriented data store? Like I understand that obviously semantic search in the context of Elastic or Weaviate, where it's like, it's a search database. We have keyword search, BM25. We have vector search, semantic search, hybrid search, all of these different ways of combining these results. And what does it mean in an OLAP database?
I would say so. The main use case for us, I'll motivate it in a use case. One of the biggest use cases for us where vector search is utilized is fraud analytics. And the example there would be maybe you're already using an OLAP data store to like analyze fraudulent behavior based on heuristics, which are basically rules, which are basically aggregations. Like you've got some sort of data, and you're trying to find ultimately like aggregations and ranges to know whether or not this new event matches something that you expect or not. The vector search part becomes relevant when now you want to detect fraudulent behavior on some additional characteristics that are not rules based, right? That are more like where vectors specialize, which is like kind of more fuzzy search type of matching. At that point, you don't necessarily, you have a few options. You can keep your OLAP database and add say like a specialized vector database. Usually the scale at which our customers do it, there's no need for that, right? So what they say is like, well, can we just do this in ClickHouse? Can we just add these vectors embeddings to ClickHouse, and in addition to our already powerful heuristics-based fraud detection, can we just add this other detection method? And the answer is yes, right? And so that's kind of how we've been focusing on it. We think of it as an additional type of analytics, almost query that you can make in addition to your, let's call them traditional analytical queries. It's honestly not the biggest use case for us. Like, I'll be honest, like still, like, when it comes to analytics, people just use good old aggregations. Like this is what powers the majority of our use cases. But when there are hybrid use cases, they can put in embeddings and they just add it. And again, fraud detection is one of the biggest use cases.
Are you guys investing a lot into engineering around this stuff, around like multi-vector search, different types of embedding models, integrating with LLMs to generate the embeddings? Like how do you guys think about that from a product point of view? Not
a ton, because like most of these customers, okay, so let me tell you like where we have invested. First, we started off, by saying you can do this kind of brute search because brute force, because we did have an approximate method. It was based on Hanoi. We tested it out. It was a community contribution, and frankly, it didn't work to the scale and efficiency that we wanted. So we said, okay, we do need to build an approximate vector search, or we're gonna base it on HNSW from kind of our reading. Like that was the winning method.
Yeah, you did like an ANN or KNN search or something, yeah.
And like we'll take some time to do it. Until then, like we'll show our customers how it's possible to do it just via linear scan. And It has linear scans just actually has some benefits. For instance, especially if you are combining it with some filtering mechanisms, there are no restrictions on the order you do it. You basically just can do your pre-filtering at any point, and you can combine the vector search step with filtering pretty effectively if you're just doing linear scans. So a lot of our customers started off with that. Like before we had production ready HNSW approximate vector search, they would do linear scans, and in ClickHouse, it scaled quite well to their workloads. At this user conference, we announced HNSW vector search. It's not yet in GA, but it's like in the latest stages of public beta. We have many customers already running it. But what was interesting to me is some of the customers, or many of the customers actually, it started off with kind of the brute force method. They prefer to stay with it, right? Like even though it takes more resources, they get an exact answer. And again, they keep the flexibility of engineering in any way that they want.
What are the limitations of that? And because I know you're big on like, oh, we have, we can scan a trillion rows in this much time, or we have a petabyte of data, but you're not scanning a trillion vectors.
Yeah, forget the exact numbers, Chad. I mean, maybe I'll get back to you like with some additional information after the show. There are definitely going to be limitations. Like they're going to be a point kind of scale where, depending on the size of your vectors, depending on the type of, vector search that you're doing, and depending on the volume, both of like how many vectors you have, but also the rest of the body of data that you're kind of comparing it to, there are going to be limits. But kind of what we've seen, at least in the fraud analytics use case, we haven't yet run into them in a substantial way, and our customers have been happy. Yeah, so it could be use case specific. Yeah.
It seems like vectors are a data type, not a database. And I hesitate to say that because everyone's branding themselves as a vector database, including us. Like, at Elastic, we're doing that. But more and more, it's just another data type in the database. And
that's how I see it, Steve. I think that's a really well said, actually. Data type and, kind of like functions associated with that data type, like a detection
it's the fundamental data type of ML in a way, right? It's like one of the enabling data types, I would say.
Yeah, but I don't really hear people talking about why you would use one particular vector database over another based on use case. Yeah, obviously it's the scale and this and that, but the idea that one vector database could be good for fraud and analytics and another vector database could be good for like e-commerce search, that's a new idea to me. So that's very interesting.
I don't know that it's the only use case. It's just the one that's been most prominent for us. And it could be that maybe it was limited by the fact that we haven't had huge investments in some of the things that you've mentioned, Chad, like and just the fraud analytics use case. First of all, again, highly technical. We see, lots of custom built stacks there. And again, we just are already in that stack. So that was just very natural. You actually mentioned whether we have functions for adding embeddings. We don't. We just ask our customers to use UDFs, and they can do all kinds of stuff with UDFs. So it could be just related to the way that we've invested so far, and it could be just limited to the use cases for which we've optimized so far, right? And it's possible that as we continue to invest, we'll find other use cases. But the fraud analytics use case has been very fruitful and definitely been great design partners in that space for us as we worked on this domain.
I think it's really interesting on the fraud detection thing because I have a renewed interest in this because my bank account was hacked last year.
Oh, no.
The way they did it was very interesting, but it led me to start thinking more and more about how the rise of LLMs and agents and prompts is like a whole new attack vector for hackers. And how do you detect malicious intent in a conversation? Because it's pretty easy nowadays to track malicious intent when you see someone hopping around your network, sending data packets to a new URL that you've never seen before. Like that's kind of a known pattern. But when someone calls the support desk and says, I'm the CEO, my email password isn't working, please send me a new email, I gotta go, click. Like that's a whole nother level of how do you detect whether or not that's malicious, what they say and how they say it. And then, there was a prompt injection thing on Windows machines with Copilot that I wasn't even really aware of until late last year, where people can actually change the prompts and inject things in text. And now how do you detect malicious intent in a prompt or in a chat conversation in real time in some cases,
Yeah. I don't know if you guys are fans of the show Black Mirror, but like as you were talking here, I'm imagining this dystopian world where like it's AI basically doing all kinds of fraudulent behavior and like AI trying to detect it.
Oh yeah,
battle of AI.
I think it was the leader of Anthropic said the only way to fight bad AI is with more good AI, and I haven't heard a better way to summarize it.
Yeah.
How do we fight evil in the world? More good than evil.
That's right. Yeah. a lot to think about there.
Yeah. I can't wait for the next season of Black Mirror. It's probably going to be very good. And
the new season just came out. I mean, it's
it just
very
came
good.
out.
Oh, that's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through it. I just watched the Paul Giamatti episode yesterday.
I haven't
Very
Don't
good.
tell me. I only watched the first one, so I'm just getting
The
into
first
it.
one was crazy.
First one was
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was. I was like, wow, what a bang to the season.
Yeah,
That's right.
Second or
That's
third one was
right.
kind of a snooze fest for me, but
Yeah, they hit or miss, and some are much more dystopian than others,
Mhm.
right? And like, oh, that's dark. Like, oh yeah, we're basically we're gonna have to just keep paying money to stay alive, you know.
subscription for life.
It's so sad. It was
There was
very
a
sad.
Justin Timberlake movie about that at some point.
The subscriptionification and the enshittification of
Yeah.
all life.
Yeah.
It feels inevitable. Like that was really on the money. I think about what is coming.
Yeah, my husband and I were very depressed. We looked at it. We just happened to have a conversation with our friends about something about like, expensive like prescription medications. But this was like next level. I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
That's right.
Yeah, crazy.
You have to subscribe for emotions at level 9.
Exactly.
versus
Exactly
level
right.
3.
Can we talk about acquisitions that ClickHouse has made? You guys have made a few acquisitions lately.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk about them. So let's maybe actually start with the Postgres
The
use case.
CDC one, yeah.
The CDC one, exactly. So we acquired a company called PeerDB about a year ago. How this came about, actually, again, to credit Jake Vernon, he reached out to me. He's like, look, Tanya, well, we've already known that Postgres and ClickHouse were often used in the same use case where Postgres was the source of transactional data and then analytical tables went to ClickHouse. And actually in our user council meeting, which we hold, if not quarterly, but every other year in 2 major geographies right now in New York and in San Francisco, and we're looking to take it more global. Our New York user council, actually, like almost everyone raised their hand and said, we right now connect Postgres to ClickHouse via clunky like Kafka and Debezium. And like that is actually like, if you talk about toil that we have as like platform owners, that's the biggest source of toil. And it was just unmistakable. And SAs have already been telling us this, but like, when every customer in the room that is, spending a significant amount of money with us, running our cloud, is telling me this, like it was like in the face. And by the way, I would recommend doing this, like invite your not even necessarily highest paying, but most vocal and visionary and sort of like opinionated users to like a small exclusive user council. It shouldn't necessarily be like, oh, like everybody has to be there. 6, 7 people, no more. They all need to talk, and like they'll tell you what it is that you're missing. Like, and they'll stare you in the face once you talk to these users and ask them about toil. The thing is, it didn't even naturally come up until I asked them, what's the one thing you guys are doing? You're like, why am I doing this? And they're like, yeah, the CDC stuff. And so at the same time, Jake actually started talking to this PeerDB company. PeerDB, the name comes from like, peering DBs, like obviously, right? And their vision was like every DB that needs to connect will build like a sync to it. But then, of course, like as a startup, it was a YC company startup, they had to specialize very quickly. And so they focused on Postgres because they were ex-Citus people and they were Postgres experts. And then they looked around, like as to what the requests were to peer with. And the two were Snowflake and ClickHouse. And they're like, Snowflake makes sense. Like, of course, we hear about them everywhere. But ClickHouse was like the fastest growing and actually took over Snowflake as their most popular sync. And so we started partnering in the field. Jake started bringing them into deals, and it just became, and we knew technology worked. These guys knew how to do CDC at scale. It worked in our customer environments. It solved a real problem. And so we came to them and said, come on, like we gotta get together. And it was one of these things where right away, you meet founders and like if there's a spark, if they think like you, if they have the same bias to action as you. It was like a 6-person company. It was a match made in heaven. So they joined us, and they've just been some of the most visionary people I've ever worked with. Sai and Kaushik. Sai is the CEO. Kaushik is the CTO. The whole team is amazing, and they've just been knocking it out of the park like since they joined us.
So when you integrated them, did you change it so that they basically only sync to ClickHouse now?
So we kept the open source because they actually have an open source distribution, and then we host it in our cloud. And so what we did is we left open source as is. All of the syncs are there. They're in maintenance mode. We would accept contributions if somebody wanted to continue to make, because like we had obviously they had customers that were syncing to Snowflake, and we're like, how do we make sure that we don't pull a rug from under them? And we made sure that they had an exit path, and we made sure that the open source was still there, and they had a chance to kind of learn how to host it themselves. It's in maintenance mode. We're not investing a ton in it, but we, of course, would accept contributions. What we host in our cloud is only the Postgres to ClickHouse sync. And now we're expanding the list of sources. And we're looking at MySQL, Mongo is like our next ones. But yeah, it's only the ClickHouse sync. And it's part of our ClickPipes product now. ClickPipes is basically the hosted ingest product that we have in the cloud.
anytime I've ever done Postgres replication, it's been just a huge pain in my ass because you're trying to like tail the write ahead log and replicate it this way. And whereas when I was at DynamoDB made it very easy. It's just like you can just have an event posted to a queue every time a change is made. And then you can have a Lambda function that just processes every change. It's guaranteed to be in order. It's guaranteed to be, exactly once, all of that.
The part that I skipped, actually, there was a step in between where first we asked our engineering team, do you think we can build it in-house? And our ClickPipes team kind of went away, did a bunch of research, and they came back and said, we could try, but honestly, we probably just would end up hosting DBZoom like everybody else, because to do it right in a native way, that requires a lot of Postgres expertise. So he's like, Tanya, if you just want us to host DBZoom, which is kind of more of an inferior solution, it has many known limitations, we could do that. But if you want something that actually scales in native, we need to look at acquisitions. And that's when the PeerDB story started evolving. We're like, this is our preferred solution. Like, we want something native. We want something that truly scales, is cost effective. And we're just so happy that it came together. And the second acquisition we announced is HyperDX. It's a company we also met in person at a show. We went and we sponsored KubeCon North America in the end of last year in 2024. At that point, we were already thinking about let me step back. ClickHouse is primarily like an analytical database. While we are used in observability use cases today, it's primarily by companies that are building their own stacks. And this is where we partner with Grafana. Anybody that has a multi-data source story to their observability, maybe they're using Elastic for logging, maybe they're using Prometheus for metrics, maybe they're using ClickHouse for traces. Grafana would be that unifying UI for that use case. And that's kind of how we've been approaching the market to date. Internally, we actually moved all of our observability to ClickHouse only for all signals. And we were already using Grafana. On top of it, we knew the good and the bad. Grafana is extremely powerful, but there were definitely use cases where we wanted a more like native experience. And our customers that adopted the same type of solution were telling us they were like building basically their own version of Kibana. They were building like, a discover interface. And we were like, okay, like, should we invest more basically for these users that are betting on ClickHouse, kind of for more than one signal and kind of want a more of an opinionated experience. So we were starting to think about building something, which again, like, it was hard for me to prioritize that. I know what a huge investment it is. And for me, it's not just engineering investment. Like, at that point, you're going to start building like native experiences. You need thought leadership. You need people that really are very, very passionate about the use case and don't just build something that was built 10 years ago, but think about where the industry is going. Like, what's going to be observability workflows, of the future. So I knew at that point, if we were going to invest in a native interface, I wanted like a opinionated team inside ClickHouse building it. And I preferred an acquisition because honestly, like, trying to build that organically, there's a huge kind of time to market component there. And we just weren't sure like we could find the right company. We didn't know of one like right away, right off the top of our head. And so when we went to KubeCon North America, just completely by accident, because like one of our, Dale actually kind of walked around, met with every vendor there that was like observability. There was like 30 of them, right? And asked them, first of all, what database they're using underneath. Often it was actually ClickHouse, at least in some capacity. And then, try to kind of get their story, like, what's different about you? And the HyperDX team has absolutely stood out. First of all, they use ClickHouse for everything. Every signal was ClickHouse. And they just open sourced, actually, not just like a Kibana-like experience, but like even kind of going even further. Like, they had every observability signal there, even session replay, natively built on ClickHouse, and just like a beautiful UI. And so what we did before we did anything is we actually took this open source UI, we sent it to our cloud SRE team. We're like, just set it up. Let's see if it scales. Let's see if it works on our 20 petabyte workload. And it did. Like, we set it up and it just worked. And like, there were all these heart emojis in like our SRE channel. And they're all like, we love HyperDX. And I'm like, guys, this is it. Like, we have to go. Like, if SREs, and our SREs are a tough crowd. Like, they're not easily sending out heart emojis. You know what I mean? It's a tough job looking after our cloud. And so that was quite a signal for me to really like go convince these founders to join us. So we were very lucky that they did get excited about the possibility of joining us. They joined us in April. Yeah, we're building what we're calling ClickStack now. So this is like an open source first stack, which is a familiar play, I think, to both of you. Open telemetry first, very much. This is what we use internally. It works extremely well. So open telemetry is our preferred signal. Of course, you can send other type of data, and actually the UI, the HyperDX UI, is compatible with any schema that's in ClickHouse. You can kind of customize it, but open telemetry is what we would recommend, and that's what we kind of support in the community as a data source, ClickHouse, and then the HyperDX UI.
Tanya, how do you decide when you're looking at companies like HyperDX whether you should partner or acquire?
Good question. I mean, I think it's size. I mean, so again, both PeerDB and HyperDX were relatively small teams. Like we're talking sub 10 in terms of total team size. And that's still within kind of like at our stage, we're 350, going on 400 person company. I can't easily absorb a 100 person company, but 5 to 10 is like, yeah, we can sort of, bring them on, make sure that they're successful. This is, by the way, very important to me. Like as a founder of a 5 to 10 person company, you're coming to even a 300, 400 person company. It's a huge culture shock. You have to really support these founders, these teams. We look like IBM to them. They're like, Tanya, you are so bureaucratic. I'm like, you have not seen bureaucratic. Like, trust me.
They're like, too many processes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like, what is this security team? I'm like, guys, you don't understand. We actually have compliance. We have to meet in cloud. Of course, there's a security team looking like at access. They're like, why do we have to go through like access onboarding? I'm like, trust me. Like, it's just stage appropriate for us. Like, just kind of bear with us. You'll get there. So yeah, it's a journey for sure. Like, so supporting these founders is hugely top of mind for us, making sure that they understand why we're doing something. At the same time, if they have, a point of view on something that we should do to move even faster, like we have to be open to it, right? And make sure that we welcome those fresh perspectives.
Is there anything specific that you had to think through when you were acquiring companies like PeerDB and HyperDX, where you're like, we don't want to kill the momentum they already have? And by acquiring them, how will that change the psychology and the market around that company?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting with PeerDB. I mean, they were a fairly early stage, I would say. And if anything, like since they've joined us, like they've, like the growth, like hockey stick from the very beginning, right? So it's sort of like, it was kind of an obvious, like, turning point for them in terms of awareness and adoption, joining forces with us. I would say it's the same for HyperDX, especially now with ClickStack. It's kind of becoming like this sort of buzzword out there. And so I think in both cases, because of like the early stage that they were in, it was an exciting moment for them to join this community and like have a sort of like something differentiated in this community and building, honestly, in many cases from scratch. I mean, observability use case, as you know, I led observability at Elastic and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And when I first joined ClickHouse, I was like, like I need almost like a break from it. Like it just felt like at the time, at least I didn't see like a ton that I had, like fresh ideas that I had at the time, like of what will be different about observability 5 to 10 years forward. Now I actually have some fresh ideas. So first of all, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but one thing I see is I do think that the observability use case will start looking a lot more like data engineering use case over time. If you think about vendors like Datadog, they write your data ultimately to object store. They just lock it in this proprietary stack. They don't give access to this data. And so why? Like that doesn't make sense. If you look at Databricks, it's also object store. There's in the data engineering space, there are all these open formats. Why couldn't observability vendors adopt basically that architecture and still allow access to the underlying data to data scientists, to data analysts? Like, why should it have to be locked away? So I think like the separate stacks for data engineering and data observability eventually will be a thing of the past. I would like to see ClickHouse be part of that change because we have customers in both camps, so to speak. We have more and more customers on both sides who are like, look, I just want unified access to the data. I want it to live on object store, sure. I want it to be accessible through an open data lake to everybody. If I do need some specialized kind of access layer, it should be synced back and forth. Like if you want, like in your proprietary format for speed, right, a subset of the hot data, but then make sure that it's synced back and forth. And actually we're exploring patterns like, okay, like does it land first in ClickHouse, then gets written to a data lake, or does it land in a data lake, then gets written to ClickHouse? There's different kind of schools of thoughts on the best way to sequence that. But I kind of see it evolving in that direction more from kind of a data architecture perspective. It'll take years because it takes years, I think.
I don't know if I'm convinced yet. Like, I do think your perspective is well thought out and like it could happen. But when you apply the filter of MCP and maybe making it less important where the data comes from, because now the interaction's happening through an agent through the MCP server. So who cares where the data is and what formats it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe so. I think. But then, okay, so that brings me to my next point. I actually think then, if that's the case, the pricing model, coming back to pricing, the pricing models will have to get adopted to it. Because now you have to also, so like the current observability pricing models is still very much based on volume. It's like, the number of metric points you put in your service, number of something. It's like you count things on the inbound.
Yep.
I actually think it should be more usage-based. Who cares how many things you put in there, right? It just gets written to ultimately fairly cheap storage. price on access to the data. Like, I think that's really how, then I think things will start making more sense, right? Like, that's kind of how I see it. So yeah, but either way, the industry will have to change, either on the pricing model or the data architecture.
I think people, they don't want to make reads too expensive because they don't want people to feel like they have to think about what they're reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know. I think, once you start talking about the benefit of agentic workflows and AI having access to that data and the importance of that experimentation, minds will change. Again, coming back to observability, root cause analysis is still one of the most unsolved problems, especially like when you need kind of ad hoc access to that data to solve some really hot problems. And the fact that most observability tools are limited to the most recent data sets because of cost, because of the pricing model, actually, not because of underlying storage, that limits ability of even agents to do that root cause analysis. So I don't know, something is going to have to change.
Tanya, it's interesting because like one of the things I've been saying since LLMs became a thing is like I haven't thought about the cost of a query in a long time. And because I don't have to think about how much it costs me to go to Google and ask a question, I ask a lot of questions. As soon as you implement a barrier or a thought process into like, should I ask this question because I know it's going to cost me money? Like, and LLMs started me thinking about this again because every time I ask a question, I get charged for tokens. Now, the cost is coming down over time and it will eventually be something I don't really have to care about potentially. But it is a whole new factor in the way people are thinking about building these AI systems is there's now a cost for every single word. So I need to be very explicit and maybe I have to be a little careful to manage my cost. And I think it's just an extra mental hurdle that you put in the front of your user where it's like, do I really want to ask this question? Because it's going to make my bill go up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But see, here's kind of how I see it. So right now, these pricing decisions get made ultimately by platform owners. Like they say, okay, like we anticipate this amount of data to be kind of ingested by our tools. And so we're going to commit to that capacity based on, say, historical usage. So you're paying one way or another. Like, why is it more fair to pay and sort of sometimes artificially limit your ability to kind of even make data queryable, right, by one group versus another group deciding to ask a question? Arguably, actually, that second group that's asking an interesting question should be empowered to just ask questions. Like, why are we limiting that ability? So I think that it's more natural to price by access, ultimately.
Well, maybe you could run an experiment at ClickHouse. Like you run product, you run marketing, put a customer in a lane where it's like, okay, every question you ask is going to cost you a penny.
So we plan to. So kind of how we think about it, like I actually do think observability pricing models make sense from a standpoint of like, there's a lot of legacy kind of capacity planning that this is just how you do it. Like somebody wants to move over a workload from say New Relic or App Dynamics or something. They're used to like a certain way of pricing, and to move over to your solution, they want to price in that way. And actually, I think you should let users do that. If that's what users want to do, who am I to stand in their way? It's actually a higher margin business for us, frankly speaking, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you can just price on some random dimension that's not even that tied to your infrastructure. So fine, go ahead and pay by that. But I actually think the second somebody wants access to it, with like say through like an MCP interface, ability to spin up an extra data warehouse and just access data in that way on a usage-based basis should absolutely be available. And let the user decide. If they don't want to spin that up because whatever, they're worried about these extra questions, then don't, right? But if you want to spin it up, great. Like let's talk about like what it costs to you, right? And maybe it's not per query. I actually think that's quite punitive. I think like BigQuery does like amount of scanned data. Like there are definitely ways to make it very punitive. I think it should just be on like resource usage. Like, are you using resources or not? It doesn't need to be per query. That's definitely too much.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's for sure. On the observability thing, I was thinking like, one of the things you and I used to talk about a long time ago was like automated remediation and doing things like that. And the more I've seen the capabilities of AI, the more I think infrastructure just needs to become like plumbing. Ultimately, I don't want to care about it. And ultimately, the systems just need to run themselves. And I want to wake up in the morning with a message that says, hey, I found a bug in your code. I fixed it. I deployed it. I wrote you a root cause analysis report. You're welcome. You know what I mean?
So I was actually going to ask a question along those lines, because you guys did a blog post earlier this year, a few months ago, I think, about your SREs saw a CPU spike on Google Cloud, and it led to like a multi-month analysis tracking down a kernel bug that only was in the Google Cloud version of the Linux kernel. It's an extraordinarily detailed analysis of tracking this problem down. And do you think that that's something that an agent is going to be able to reason through and sort out without a human in the loop?
Potentially, but that requires, guess what? Agentic access to observability data,
Yeah,
which doesn't exist today. So Chad, I think you just made my point.
Yeah, but the reasoning about it, I just, it's so complex. I just cannot imagine how long it will take for an agent to be able to do that blog post analysis.
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I'm going to ask my engineers that exact question, right? Because I think a lot of the information that the engineer acted on was actually public knowledge, but just required a lot of human effort to go like dig through like, you know, all of this like knowledge base that actually agents are much more suited to do that. Like, you know, like agents are, and just LLMs are great at just taking a lot of like unstructured textual data and just chewing through it for insights. Whereas we as humans are actually very bad at it. At the same time, they're very good at, if you connect it to an analytical database, they can ask a lot of questions of structured data in a very effective and efficient way to combine with that knowledge. That's a great question, Chad. I'm going to ask, and I'll let you know what the engineer says. But again, Steve, going back to our discussion, that use case would absolutely require exactly what I'm advocating for, which is like ad hoc access to agentic workloads to observability data.
I agree. Just I think through the layer of MCP, it's just going to become democratized.
Possibly, you know, you might have a point there. Yeah. Quite possibly. I still think, though, the pricing model will need to be compatible with that.
It went beyond just observability data because it's like, well, now we got to add this thing to the Linux kernel to go, you know, get more data that we didn't have before. Someone had to reason about, I don't have enough information to get to the root cause of this. So, and it's intermittent. It only happens, it takes multiple days in between occurrences. It's random. It only happens in certain environments, but not others.
Yeah.
I'll ask that question. I'll take that particular investigation. I'll see if the team thinks like LLM could reason it. You know,
and I think
in an ideal
are
world.
starting to develop egos, which is interesting. It feels like.
Yeah.
Like you've seen probably the reports that have come out where they're lying and blackmailing people and stuff like that. Like, what is the motivation for lying? You're protecting someone, right? In this case, you're protecting yourself. They could make up an answer. Like, I don't have the data, but I don't want them to know I don't have the data because I'm supposed to be this all-knowing thing. So I'm just going to lie about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, we're getting back to Black Mirror a little bit here. By the way, I definitely, when I saw that report originally, I was like, oh my God, this is like definitely Black Mirror. Then I realized it was like an experimental setting where they turned off like the guardrails, basically, right? And they were like almost like saying like, how far would LLM go with no guardrails? And it is scary. Like it is scary, right? Because obviously somebody just could come out with an artificial intelligence with no guardrails, and we have to be prepared for that. Like what happens, if that's the case?
Well, Anthropic published a no guardrails version of DeepSeek on Hugging Face, right? So that was interesting. I guess as we wrap up here, I asked you last time, and I've asked a lot of people last time, like, why shouldn't engineering report to product? And you had a pretty good answer last time, and you've now taken it the other way. So marketing is going to report to product, or I don't know if you think about marketing reporting to product, but you have a joint organization. But anyway, there's one leader in charge of all of it. It wasn't like they took product and gave it to a marketing leader. They took marketing and gave it to a product leader. So that's really what happened.
Yep.
And I heard earlier this week that MongoDB took product and made it roll up to engineering. They did the inverse of what I think most companies should be doing. So I guess I'm just curious, like, how do you think what you're doing, is this a model that other people should follow? Do you think this is just a unique situation because of you and your background?
No.
Or would you advise other startups to have marketing and product be in the same leader group?
Yeah. Well, so maybe first of all, like I'll say like a few things. So ultimately I report, like there's 3 founders at ClickHouse. There's Aaron, who runs field, finance, operations. Yuri, the second co-founder, he runs product and marketing through me, and he actually runs engineering. So ultimately I report up to a leader who leads product and engineering. And the new thing now is marketing. And so like the question is like, is marketing now a function of like product and engineering? And kind of how I see it is, yes, I actually think for a technical infrastructure company, it should be, right? It should be absolutely an extension of your product and engineering efforts. Your messaging should be very much in line with the product strategy you have. And your product strategy should be informed by key investments in marketing, because honestly, it's a very busy, very noisy space. And how do you break through? And like, I actually think that collaboration is really fruitful. So I would say for companies in our category, yes, I would recommend this. And as I mentioned, like the user conference was a great moment when I really felt the power of that. You have one leader who's envisioning this event and executing both on logistics as well as the content and like what's going to be announced. In terms of engineering reporting up to product, I actually have a funny, I guess, anecdote. The HyperDX team, when they joined, we're like, where do we put this team? Like, it's like our first vertical team. And they're like, let's just put it under Tanya. It has engineers. So technically, I own engineering too. Kind of, yeah. But how I think about all of this is like, in the end, reporting relationships are honestly a little bit artificial. Like true leadership spans reporting lines, spans silos. Like that's really how to think about roles. When I think about my marketing role, I actually think sales is a huge stakeholder in that. Huge, right? And I don't care if they're reporting to like Yuri or Aaron, I'm going to make our sales team successful. So that's, I think, what true leadership means.
I have seen such a history at so many of the companies that I've worked at of product and sales wanting something and engineering just being like, we're going to build something else. We're going to build something else. You can't tell us what to do. And, our promotion paths are based on us, whatever it is, like at Google built, like launching a new product or launching a new feature. We don't care if anybody uses it, but we get promoted if we launch something new. There's no promotion for like maintaining something that already exists. So you end up with this almost battle between these groups. Maybe not at a startup or a small company, but the bigger the company gets.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And that can be like just like a function of like a bigger company, things becoming siloed. I do think at a growing company or at a company that's even mature, but that's like in a highly competitive space where like innovation is the only way to stay like in the battle. I think that attitude is more rare because kind of how I think about engineers ultimately, like they're very smart individuals. Like in the end, they understand for our company to grow, we have to acquire new customers. We have to make them successful. And ultimately, we are all in this boat together. And so a few things, maybe we can close with this. I mentioned we went to kind of a new way kind of to do road mapping this year. We of course have like each team's backlog and like each kind of team's individual roadmaps. But one thing that we did that's new this year is we came up with the idea of top 5 priorities for each kind of like core team. And we like really just like beat the drum around these top 5. Why 5, right?
Yeah, why not 10, Tanya?
Why not 10? I'll explain, right? So like
Steve
I actually
likes
read
10.
this book. I'll explain. I read this book called Essentialism, and I would recommend everyone to read this book. At first, I thought it was like super cheesy, like it was recommended to me, and I was like, ugh. But then like I somehow brought it on a trip, and I didn't have anything else to read, so I reread it. And the second time I read it, I was like, wait a second. Actually, I don't do enough of this. Like I don't do enough of making it very clear what the few but the most important things are. And I'm a product leader, and that's a problem. We have all these things, and yes, we have a big engineering team, but like what? Like if I wake up Aaron in the middle of the night and I'm like, Aaron, what's the number one priority for the core database engineering team? As a CEO of a database company, he should know that. But I guarantee you, many CEOs don't. And I was like, I'm going to fix this problem. Like Aaron is going to know that the number one priority for our engineering team at the moment is joins. Like if I wake him up in the middle of the night, it's joins. Like why 5? Why not 1? 1 is honestly too few. Ultimately, like we are working on a lot of like, where's vectors? Like it should be in there somewhere. 10 is too many. Like I can't remember 10. So I was like, how many can I actually remember? How many can Aaron remember? And so I came up with 5. Maybe it's not the right number. Maybe it's 4. Maybe it's 3. But it has to be humanly rememberable for the number of teams that you have. So we implemented this, idea. And of course, we had a lot of discussions. What should these priorities be? How many do we actually have? Like how many teams get like this? So we have top 5 for core, top 5 for cloud, top 5 for integrations. That's it. And so that's it. Like everybody knows there's actually ultimately 15, right? Like which now it seems like a lot, but we can still remember them. We can still remember, and for certainly top 1 for each group, everybody knows. And so mission accomplished. It really has streamlined execution. It also really motivated teams a ton. Like I found that engineering teams are really rallying around these priorities, and it's not like, oh, like I don't work on one of the top 5, and so I'm useless. That's not how people think. They think about like we as a company are rallying around it. And even if I'm working on something else that's supporting, another function, be that customer escalations, be that reliability, which is, by the way, priority 0. Priority 0 is always reliability and customer support. That's like non-negotiable. Like you're still supporting a company strategy. So I found it to be really unifying and motivating for the teams.
I think if there was 1,000 of them, Aaron could recite them from memory because his memory and recall is so incredible.
Touche.
But
Possibly for Aaron.
He's unique in that way. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Touche.
What's your career aspiration? Are you going to be a CEO one day? You going to start your own company one day?
Good question. I don't know. Maybe with co-founders, I find it exciting to work in a startup environment where there's multiple people bringing ideas together. Possibly as a co-founder, I can see myself, Chad. Yeah, I don't know if CEO would be the right role for me. Who knows, though? Maybe one day, but definitely wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out. I guess maybe next episode.
You ever go on the investor side and like work for an investment company?
I've thought about it again. This is also a possibility. Like if I at some point take a career break, quite possibly I will be doing investing, advising, just like as part of already a natural motion for me and my network. Would I join an investment firm? I don't know. Talking to other investors, it's not an easy job. It's very competitive, and it's very, you have to find your niche. Like you have to find your superpower. So unless I figured out that superpower, like what makes me a particularly good investor for a particular sort of part of the market, unless I knew that very well, I probably wouldn't do it. It's a lot of work, and it's like yet another career to build.
Yep. That's right.
And you're a product builder. You're so good at it.
Yeah.
If you ever start a company, you got to let Steve and I wet our beaks.
Oh,
right.
You got to promise that we can get in on it.
It's a promise.
Friends and family.
Because I know it's going to succeed.
Well,
Tanya, 2 hours. We always try to cut these episodes down to an hour afterwards, and I cannot do it with your episodes because every single topic is so full of information. I can't edit it down.
Oh.
And so engaging, great stories. Thank you for coming on the podcast
thank
again.
You both. Thank you both. It's been a pleasure. All right.
It's our first sequel. We're going to go Marvel style. There'll be 9 or 10 Tanya episodes. I can visualize it.
I think so.
Over the next few years. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. It's been a blast. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Tanya. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for watching. Share this out on LinkedIn. Get the word out. We'll have nice clips of Tanya talking, and I'm sure it'll be either the most watched or second most watched based on which of her first or second episode gets watched more. So thanks, and we'll see you on the next podcast.